Hi, everybody. I'm Rachel Pleasant. I'm the Marketing and Communications Director here at Piedmont University, and welcome back to Piedmont People. This is a podcast we've created to tell the stories of what makes Piedmont University great, and that is its people. And I'm really happy to have with us today in the studio Michael Azzolin, who is just a fascinating guy. He got his MBA from Piedmont, and now he runs a company in Watkinsville called PharmD, and he's going to tell us about his business and the difference it's making for patients all over the country. And so, welcome, Michael. So tell us about PharmD. What do you do in layman's terms?
Sure. Well, first of all, it's PharmD on demand.
Okay.
PharmD is the title of a pharmacist, kind of like MD.
Mm-hmm.
PharmD is a pharmacist. So I just want to clarify that. The way we started was really just out of trying to solve a problem within rural hospitals, which is that pharmacists aren't available in rural hospitals in the evenings and at nights for the most part, and over the weekends at certain times. And what that means is that medication reviews are not occurring in those locations prior to administration. So we just developed a way that allowed us to dial in and review those orders. And because we're doing it for rural hospitals, we could do it for multiple hospitals simultaneously, which allowed us to charge a fraction of the cost, but still, have enough revenue generation for it to be profitable so that we could expand our business into other markets and other areas.
How did you get into pharmacy? What was it about it that sparked your interest?
When I was in high school, in a small high school in Middle Georgia, a friend of mine and I were in a calculus class, and we were the only two guys in the calculus class. Everybody else was a girl, and the teacher asked us one day, "What do y'all plan to do when you graduate high school?" And it was baseball season, and that's all we cared about. And so we didn't know. My buddy and I didn't know. But all the girls knew what they wanted to do. And so our teacher said, "When you come in tomorrow, you need to tell us what you want to do when you grow up." So the next day we came back in. Of course, we hadn't thought about it. And my friend asked me, "Did you think about what you want to do when you grow up?" And I said, "Or when you graduate and get out of school?" I said, I don't know. I really have no idea. I said, "How about you? Did you figure anything out?" And he said, "Well, my mama told me pharmacists do pretty good, so let's be pharmacists." So he and I both went to pharmacy school. That was, for whatever reason, that just kind of set a path for us, and we just pursued it from there. We worked in small, rural, hometown independent pharmacies in our hometown, which was an awesome experience, and it really, helped us to see that that's the career we wanted to be in.
And what do you like about that, working in those settings, doing pharmacy work? What difference do you feel like you get to make in people's lives?
Well, one of the things we do in our business is we document everything that we do. So I told you before that in the hospital setting, in the rural hospital setting in particular, where there's no pharmacist in the evenings, one of the biggest things we do in a hospital as a pharmacist is review the medication order for appropriateness of therapy, not dispense. 95% of the medications are available to the nurses on the floor, and they go and retrieve the drugs from those locations. Now we put them out there. We order them from the supplier, and we have a pharmacy technician go out and put them in those dispensing machines. But our primary job is to review medications for appropriateness of therapy. And when they're not appropriate, if the patient's kidney function is not what it should be, or maybe they have a drug interaction with something they take at home, combined with something the doctor ordered in the hospital, our job is to intervene. And at this point, our company, considering the number of facilities that we service, we intervene about 18,000 times a year. Some of those are on medications that, had the patient gotten it, we consider them potential sentinel event level scenarios, meaning that if they got that medication, it would have had the potential to be severe enough that it could have caused an issue up to death. So whenever I see those, when I see our staff and our people providing a service that can potentially save a life, it's very rewarding. So that's why we do what we do.
Tell us about the scope of PharmD on demand. You're in several states, and how many employees do you have now?
About 160 employees, give or take. I don't have the data in front of me just off the top of my head. We're in 8 different states. We've been in and out of a couple, but we've worked as far west as Idaho as recently as last year. We have hospitals as far north as Vermont. We're obviously in the southeast, primarily in Georgia, but we also work in South Carolina, Louisiana, Tennessee, West Virginia. So we're kind of scattered around the country. We can work in any state. We have to obtain the right licensures in those states whenever that occurs, which is just a process. But that's the size and scope. We're mostly in hospitals, but we also service, we manage pharmacies for doctors' offices that want to open pharmacies. A lot of the way healthcare is now is not the way it was even 10 years ago. It's really more focused on outcomes, and reimbursement is focused on outcomes. Mm-hmm. So what we've seen and learned is that over time is that the business of pharmacy may not necessarily be the whole reason that a hospital or a doctor's office wants to have a pharmacy affiliated with it. It may be to supplement the services that they're providing so that they can make sure that the patient is getting the medicines they need so that they don't get sicker, which reduces cost, which makes the reimbursements better because that's how things are structured now. Mm-hmm. So, you can diagnose a patient perfectly as a physician and know exactly what they've got. You can prescribe the perfect medication. You can know exactly how to treat them, and you can give them that prescription. You can send them out the door. But if the patient can't afford it, if they can't drive to the pharmacy to get it, if they're not compliant with it because the medicine hurts their stomach or for some other reason they just don't take it, then all of that work that you've done to try to make the patient better based on what you know, it doesn't matter. It's worthless. So you've got to make sure the patients follow up with whatever the treatment regimen is. So having a pharmacy be a part of a medical team, whether it be inside of a hospital, dispensing medications for the patients whenever they leave, or whether it be a pharmacy in a doctor's office doing the same thing, can be an added benefit to patients in certain scenarios. So those are the types of places that we manage.
You got your Doctor of Pharmacy degree from the University of Georgia, mm-hmm. and then decided to come to Piedmont to get a Master of Business Administration. Why did you decide to do that? Why did you feel like this was a good place for you to get that extra degree?
Sure. I was working the night shift in the hospital pharmacy at Athens Regional, and I knew I wanted to differentiate myself. I wanted to grow. I wanted a career path that allowed me to do more things and have different choices. I didn't know at the time I wanted to start my own business, although I was actively looking at the potential of doing that in different ways. I just didn't know what it looked like. And so I knew I wanted to get an MBA for multiple reasons. Number one, I wanted to have the degree, that would help differentiate it or differentiate me from just any other pharmacist. But also, I wanted to learn the business side of the markets, the market that I was in, which is healthcare, and I wanted to learn business in general and how that might apply to pharmacy. The reason we started our business is because really we didn't go into it thinking, hey, this is going to be a business. It was a problem we were solving for one hospital that because of I like technology, and I've gravitated toward technology my whole life. I was building computers when I was in high school and middle school, mm-hmm. And I knew that there were better ways to do things in the hospital that we were in using technology. Mm-hmm. And so similarly to the fact that I was able to couple technology with pharmacy to make a better system, I really wanted to know business on a level that would help me apply that to pharmacy in a way that pharmacy I didn't learn in pharmacy alone. Gotcha. And Piedmont, the reason I chose Piedmont, it was an 18-month program that was offered at the time. I was able to still work my night shift position at the hospital and then come in from 6 to 10 a couple nights a week and take my classes. The other thing I liked about it is that the professors at the time, several of them were, I'm gonna call them bivocational, meaning that they taught in the evenings, but they worked during the day in jobs in the world. And what that told me is that they would have practical experience that we could discuss, not just the text out of a book, which was important to me.
Gotcha. Is there, without of course disclosing any personal details, but can you tell us about a patient or a moment that you've encountered in your work with PharmD On Demand that just really, affirmed for you that this was what you were meant to do, or that you're making a difference?
Sure. I mean, there's a ton. I'll give you two examples.
Okay.
We know of a patient, or I know of a person whose family member was a patient, who the patient was getting better. They had been in the hospital for an infection, and they were about to be transferred to a rehab center. And so they were completely better. Their infection was gone. It was the day of their transfer, and they had been getting IV fluids, had a little bit too much. And so as a result, they were swollen. It's typical, especially with an elderly patient. And so the doctor ordered a Lasix, which is a drug that pulls that water off of you. It makes you urinate and gets the extra fluids out of your system. Mm-hmm. He just wanted to do that before he sent him away. And it's at a location where there wasn't pharmacists after hours to review medication orders for appropriateness of therapy. The patient was in the ICU, and in the ICU, there's a lot of drugs there that are meant to save your life, right? One of them is called Levophed. Mm-hmm. And it's a drug that has to be diluted in a bigger bag of IV fluids and is dripped slowly over a series of hours, depending on how much you need it. And it's something that helps keep your heart beating in the event that you've had a heart attack or other cardiac-related event that might cause your heart to stop or try to stop. The nurse is used to giving those drugs. That vial was a little amber vial with a green label on it. The Lasix is a little amber vial of the exact same size with an orange label on it. When the nurse went to the machine to get the drug out, because it had not been verified by a pharmacist, it didn't direct her exactly where to go. And out of habit, by accident, she grabbed the Levophed instead of the Lasix. You IV push a Lasix, meaning you draw it up in a syringe and you push the entire amount over a minute or so into the patient's vein. Thinking she was giving Lasix, she drew up the Levophed and pushed it in the patient's vein. He died. His heart stopped. Likewise, or on the flip side of that, early on, the first hospital we ever worked in was a small hospital in Dayton, Tennessee, and it took us 18 months to get our first contract. So we worked hard to get to that first point where we actually were able to sell people on the concept. And there was a hospital there in Dayton, Tennessee that we were working for just on the weekends. And we would only dial in about every 8 hours, and we would clean up orders. We would kind of process orders and check them for appropriateness of therapy. And I wasn't doing it because I wasn't licensed in Tennessee. We had our first ever employee who was licensed in Tennessee. She was covering that night, and a patient had come in because that morning, it was a Friday evening, that morning she had overdosed on Tylenol in an attempt to end her life. But that evening, she decided she didn't want to. And the way Tylenol overdoses work, it takes, 72 hours. It takes a few days for it to actually end your life. And there's a period of time where you can reverse it. You can actually prevent it from being toxic in your body. And you have to get a certain amount of a certain type of drug in your body at a certain point to prevent that Tylenol from converting to an active metabolite, which is what ultimately can end your life. And the doctor had ordered the antidote, and started the patient on the antidote that evening. But by accident, he put the order in the system for 400 milligrams, and it should have been 4,000 milligrams. And our pharmacist, when she dialed in, saw that and knew the dose was wrong. At this point, the nurses had already given 2 doses of exactly what the doctor ordered. So she called and had to speak to 3 different people before she finally got someone who was willing to call the doctor, because at this point it was 11 o'clock at night and no one wanted to bug him. Understandably so. But we eventually got a hold of the doctor, and the doctor said, "Oh yeah, that's wrong. I meant to order 4,000 milligrams, not 400." So we started the series over again, and by Monday morning the patient was better and getting transferred to a mental health facility. So had that not happened, she would have passed away. So that's 2 examples: one where the pharmacist is not available, one where the pharmacist was. And that was the first year that we were servicing any hospitals ever. And at that point, we realized that we needed to be doing that everywhere we could.
Right. Yeah. Couple last questions.
Sure.
As far as your degree from Piedmont, can you point to something specific that you're using in your day-to-day work that you gained from Piedmont that you are putting to work?
Yeah, I think I told you this story before, but we had a professor and it was she taught several classes, but she was one of the first classes that I was in. And when I first got there, my goal was just to get my MBA, learn what I could, kind of glean what I could from people. So I would sit in the back and mind my own business, and I was a pretty decent student from a grade perspective, so I knew I could do the work. And but we were in a class, I think, called Organizational Leadership, and she had a desire to have everybody talk and contribute, and I didn't. So I don't know if this was planned or not, but one day she got into a conversation with a student sitting next to her about randomly. So I think it was probably planned. But she said, I can't remember the girl's name, but she said, so do you prefer brand name Tylenol or generic Tylenol? And the girl, and I just perked up. I'm like, where did that come from? And the girl said, oh, I can't take generic. I've got to take brand name. The generic does not work for me. Brand name is the only thing that works. And I started getting hot in my seat because I'd been through pharmacy school, right? And in pharmacy school, we study science, statistics, chemistry, and we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that every generic is within 3% of the potency of the brand name. Otherwise, it's not allowed to go to market. Mm-hmm. We know sometimes it could be 2% stronger. Sometimes it could be 2% or 3% below that strength. But we know that it should be as good as the brand name. So I engaged, and I started explaining to her why she was wrong and why she shouldn't waste her money on the brand name Tylenol and she should take the generic. And we had a dialogue for a while back and forth, and the professor just let it go on for a few minutes, and then she interrupted. And obviously that day what we were talking about was just personal choice and and people's perception relative to business. And because she let me see in that moment that it really didn't matter to me or to the girl that was taking the medication, assuming that this was a real scenario, that they are the same. If she's happier with the brand name, even if it costs her more, then relative to business, as long as it's not unethical or immoral, we may want to consider letting her take the Tylenol. Don't try to push her to the generic. Even as a pharmacist who might know the chemistry and the science behind it, if that makes her happier in her purchase or in her choice, then we should consider letting it happen. And I've carried that mentality. That's not something that's taught in pharmacy school. They don't teach us to beat people over the head, but they do teach us to our job is to make people better, right? So sometimes we think about doing that as pharmacists or even other clinicians at the expense of what the choice is of the patient. So in our business, we've let that kind of carry over. We listen to our clients. We try to understand what it is that they want and what it is that they need, even if we think maybe there's a better option. As long as it's not unethical or immoral, then we'll help them through that. And I'm thinking about now our hospital administrators at some of our locations. We may have ideas that we think are the right way to do things, and we'll be happy to share those ideas. But if the administrators want to take a different route, then it's our job to support them through it, especially as long as there's no unethical or immoral issues with it.
All right, so we started this podcast only recently, and we have decided to close it with a segment we're calling Where Else Would You Rather Be? And the title of the segment came from our very first guest, Brett Loftus, who is the announcer for our baseball games, our different athletic events here. And so we've decided to use that catchphrase and ask our guests on this podcast, where else would you rather be? And so, Michael, I wondered if you could just share a fond memory or something that you really appreciated about Piedmont in answer to the question, where else would you rather be?
Well, my time at Piedmont gave me an opportunity to interact with a lot of different people that had experiences in a lot of different aspects of business. That was my focus here. And had a lot to bring to the table to shape and mold, how I think about things, particularly from a business perspective. And I guess to answer your question directly, what I'm doing now in my professional career brings me more satisfaction than I ever would have thought it would. I love my profession, pharmacy. But the career path that I took was in part shaped and molded by Piedmont. So, got a wonderful family and great kids, and I enjoy my time with them. So where I want to be is right where I am, to be honest with you. And I just appreciate the opportunity to have gone to school here and to have gained the knowledge and the degree that I did, and how it's helped to mold who I am today.
Thank you for coming to talk to us today, Michael. It was really great to have you.
Thank you. You too. Pretty sure I blanked on that one. That's it.
All right.